Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. Back on the show today, Uncle Miles. So Miles Kessler, a very good friend of mine, extremely senior aikido teacher, meditation teacher, someone who's been working at online meditation conferences and various other things for a while. Good friend of mine from Israel. Miles, welcome.
Hey Mark, how you doing?
Pretty good. I just got off the phone to various trainers, been working on this project, COVID Calm, for doctors and nurses. So that's going well, deep in that. It's Friday the 3rd of April. You are in Tel Aviv, right?
Friday the 3rd of April, mid-apocalypse. Yes, I'm in Tel Aviv.
Mid the end times. So I'm thinking of calling this like meditation for the end times or something like that.
All right, sure. Why not? Let's go there.
Okay, should we do it? We haven't really
I'm down with that.
Just give us an update. You're in Israel. That's always people are sort of interested to hear different parts of the world. What's the situation there?
The shit's hitting the fan as much as everywhere else. Although Israel did, Israel's an interesting place. First, people are very individualistic, so they don't like to be told what to do. But with one exception, when there's a national crisis, and they have been through many national crises for whatever reason. We won't even go there in terms of the politics. But when shit hits the fan, people get together here. So the borders were closed down pretty early. Self-quarantines were in place already for a month now. And even though the cases are growing, it's due to the testing. And I feel like today's getting warm. Tomorrow's going to be 80 degrees. I feel like we're kind of moving in. The curve is. I feel like we're on the downward slope, even though the numbers are still climbing. The general public has pretty much got it together here.
It's interesting culturally, isn't it? That, as a friend of mine said, all the Jews that did as they were told are all dead. And so there is this rebellious sort of streak there that, hyper individually. I found trainings there quite difficult to do sometimes because it's so rebellious. But there's also this super communal, let's all pull together. And this is a country that knows how to do crisis. This country, there's a country that's had more crisis than the rest of any other developed country in the Western world, kind of thing. So I can imagine that being quite adaptive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a few exceptions, like the ultra Orthodox. They're just now getting around to, getting in line, but most of the cases are actually in their communities. It's kind of spread out, but they didn't really obey the rules for a while because they have a greater God that tells them what to do. But other than that, the thing in Israel, here's the thing in Israel, whenever there's a crisis, it's like, hey, we're all in this together. The moment the crisis is over, hey, we're in this alone. So that's this weird extremes that we work with here.
The
as you know,
Israel. Interesting. Okay, your family all safe and well? Everyone's all good with you?
Everybody's good. Yeah, we're locked down and we're hunkering down in our homes, and it's kind of look, Mark. There's a lot of silver linings in this. Life has just slowed down. Things have become much more simpler. The kids are, we had 2 little ones, and we're kind of, there's a flow with how we're educating them and playing with them, and it's just things are slowed down. So there's a deeper connection that's happening as well.
And how about someone who runs an aikido dojo? I mean, I imagine that's closed down for a while. I mean, how's that been?
Yeah, we're down. We're in our 3rd week closed now, and financially we're not going to survive. But I'm sure that that's the same case with everybody. So, we're connecting with the students online, and I've been quite busy with my other stuff, so I haven't been able to like do online classes. But we're just getting that started this coming week, and so it's everybody's still there. We're all in this together. So we've had a few meetings with the group, and everybody seems to have a pretty positive outlook on the future of the dojo.
Well, you're one of the people that encouraged me to move to Zoom a few years ago and do online stuff. I mean, you're definitely a big influence on the Embodiment Conference happening. Daniela, who runs it with me, is a student of yours, or has been in the past. And, so I think thank you, first of all, Miles, for pushing me towards that, because this is a hell of a useful thing to have now, to have that kind of skill. Your main thing for a while has been teaching meditation online, right? That's been one of your biggest things.
Yeah, exactly. Meditation and self-development courses. But yeah, basically all around meditation and developmental psychology, I guess you could say. Those are the 2 main things.
Well, maybe let's focus a little bit on meditation then. I was in Martin Elwood's meditation group this morning, over 1,000 people online meditating together. It's really nice. And we're doing it as part of the embodiment circles online. People can look those up. Yeah, I don't really know where to begin in this conversation. What's interesting to you right now? Is it like the necessity of meditation? Is it how people are doing it technically online? Like, what's alive in you in terms of to talk about?
Yeah, well, I would basically say that what's alive is that it's interesting looking at meditation in these times because everything around us is shaking. Everything that we rely on. I mean, look at everybody's on Zoom these days, right?
Right.
I read something. Who knows if it's true or not? But Zoom is a massive malware, and now it's really getting into everybody's. Okay, so Zoom was stable, but then we hear that. Can you imagine if Zoom destabilized?
Uh-huh.
I mean, you have a huge conference coming up. It's like everything is dependent right now on Zoom.
Right. So that's a vulnerability for us, for sure. We've looked at alternatives, but it's a vulnerability. Yeah.
But here's the point, Mark. Everything's a vulnerability.
Always.
And this time has shown us that more than anything else. Whatever you relied on, whatever you depended on, whatever you counted on, I hope it's still there. I hope it's stable. I hope it's in place for everybody. But it's all shakeable. It's all shakeable. Everything, it just takes the right conditions, it's going to shake. And when it shakes, we shake. Everything. So everything in the universe is shakeable except for one thing. And that one thing is what is really what we're trying to discover in meditation. And it's, the very nature of our consciousness is unshakable. So why is meditation a resource in this time? Because meditation is actually the practice through purification, through a lot of practice and self-learning, learning about yourself, commitment, persistence, patience. You will begin to discover the one part that each and every human being has access to with practice, the one part of ourself that is unshakable, and it is our deepest, most true nature. It is who we are at the deepest nature. When we were born, it was there. Before we were born, it was there. It's here now, even though we're usually disconnected from it. It will be here when we die, and it'll be here when we are gone.
Yeah.
That's the part that's unshakable.
This idea in trauma work as well, that there's a part of you that can't be traumatized. There's a part of you which is untraumatizable, even in the most traumatized person.
Yes.
And this Buddhist idea of where do you take refuge? Where do you take refuge? Because what we've seen is this illusion that things are stable and unchanging and you can rely upon them and they're solid. That can be gone like that, like that.
And it will be. In a few months when this is all over, it may take a few weeks, but we're going to get back to business as usual. I think the world's changed, but for the most part, human beings being what we are, we're going to get back to, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, the whatever it is, whatever our little addictions and habits are, we're going to get right back into them. We haven't stayed in them.
I mean, I saw people responding to this crisis actually just by getting more, the first response, just getting more into whatever they already did. Whether that was partying or complaining or politics, they just went deeper into their normal thing. And I think I was talking to Tad Hargreaves, Marketing for Hippies, yesterday, and he was saying, look, from a business point of view, you need to know your vulnerabilities because it's like we've just lost the ability to travel, which for some people like us who do workshops is a big deal. But equally, we could lose local contact. We could lose Zoom. We could lose Facebook could go down. We could get banned from Instagram, whatever. Like if we have those inability to shift and all our eggs in one basket, it's going to be disastrous.
Yeah, and Mark, just pointing down, the if I can just be Buddhist for a moment here, not to be over Buddhist, but it is kind of, I kind of rest on that perspective in a way, without being heavily identified as a Buddhist. But that was the Buddhist first teaching. The first thing he taught, he said he got it. Whatever he did, he awakened to whatever level, which is supposed to be, if we believe the stories and mythology, absolutely perfectly awakened. And he decided he didn't have to teach. He sat for like 35 days and decided, okay, I'm actually going to teach. And then he decided the first thing he was going to teach was the Four Noble Truths. And truth number one is exactly what we're talking about, dukkha satya, that suffering or destabilization or unsatisfactoriness or the nature that nothing is, we're not able to hang on to anything actually, that dukkha is true. It's true. And we have one basic practice in relationship to that. And that's the practice of acceptance. It all starts from there. Once we get aligned with that, then the whole path can begin to unfold.
It's one of the main coaching questions I'm asking a lot of people one-on-one right now, and also on our stress calls with the doctors, is what do you need to accept right now? Or what do you choose to accept? The choosing of it empowers people in the situation where they're disempowered. Because I can't change this external situation, so I have to accept it. But then if I have the frame that I have to, I feel like a victim. Whereas if I say, Jordan Peterson's thing, if you ride out to meet the dragon, if I say I choose to accept it, now I'm empowered again in relation to reality. I'm in relation to reality again. So instead of being in denial or fear or bargaining or any of these other kind of grief responses, the most healthy response eventually is always being in contact with reality. And that requires acceptance. That's the most practical position, as well as the most, we could say, sort of spiritually enlightened position.
Perfect. So let's actually invite all the listeners right now to just feel in. Who knows? Maybe we're still in the middle of this crisis. Maybe it's over. I don't know when this is going to be aired. But regardless, just feel in right now, physically, on a physical level. What are you not accepting? Or you can say physically, where's this resistance? I have a little pain in my hip, or I don't know, there's a sore in my shoulder. I got a spot in my back, or I'm just like kind of walking around contracted. What is it physically? One. You could also say emotionally. What is it that you're resisting, not accepting right now? Mentally, whatever that means to you. What are you resisting, not accepting right now? And whatever aspect of being human that you want to look at, reflect, as a prism to look through, just ask yourself simply, what is it that I'm not accepting right now? And that puts us right there right there on the path of practice. And it's the path of practice because just like you said, we've chose to look at it, and that's an empowering thing.
How can I be a little bit more open to what is right now? Coaching questions like that, and actually as an embodied experiential inquiry during meditation. And how can I be a bit more yes is another way I sometimes put it, the yes to what is.
It's awesome. It's so beautiful.
This sounds abstract.
I'll tell you why I think it's
practical. Super practical.
I hear you. Yeah, I'll tell you why it sounds beautiful to me is because what you're doing is you're inviting people to connect with the part of them that already has a positive relationship to the shit that we have to face in life. Usually we're like, no, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want that. But there is always a part of us that's open to it if it's given the right conditions. If it doesn't, trigger us to close down and resist. And that invitation, that question, how can you open up to this? Or what would it mean to open up to this? That's it.
And there is a direct, and this was the great truth of Buddhism, which, we reframe in different ways in 12-step and in modern psychology or whatever, Jordan Peterson, whoever, is that there is a direct proportional correlation between how much we deny reality and how much we suffer. That's a direct linear correlation. So the more I deny what's happening, even if it seems like a kind of, it's nice to tell a white lie to myself or bullshit myself, as John Vervaeke says, that stuff always bites us on the ass. And potentially always. Right now in fatal ways, and always in mental health ways.
Yeah, always.
So the one thing, just as a side note, the Buddha, when he was first asked to teach, did say he wouldn't do it because it would be wearisome and vexatious. And that's a phrase that comes back to me most of the time when I'm teaching. He was like, fucking no, I'm enlightened, man. I don't really want to do it. It'll be a hassle.
Is that the right quote? Is that the right quote? I thought he said no, it's a fucking pain in the ass.
He said it'd be a ball ache. That's what he said. He said, nah, man, I'm not doing it. Fucking people are muppets. And his friend said, but there are some, but with a little dust in their eye. He said, yeah, but most of them are fucking on Facebook. They're muppets. No, so sense of humor is another big one for these times, right? And this is
absolutely.
I think, Jewish tradition is just loaded with humor, sometimes even quite dark humor. Like when we had Shinzen and Paul on the show, fucking hell.
It was great.
Like these are both pretty advanced practitioners, and the jokes they were making, and they're both Jewish, obviously. But it's like that seems to be part of the Jewish tradition, is that humor in the face of the horror of reality. Because I think humor enables you to look at the horrific. It enables you to look at that which is on a small scale, the unpalatable. Right up to the Holocaust, the horrific, and everything in between on that scale. So I really think humor just very naturally comes with this. Except it's like the only sugar you're allowed to sprinkle on reality is humor. That's it. That's the only sugar you're allowed on top of this motherfucker.
Well, it depends on who you're telling the joke to, of course. But yeah, I agree with that.
Well, people that can't get a joke, they're not doing so well right now. People that can't get a joke. So I'm hoping there'll be an encouragement of humor. Okay, what more on meditation? Like I've seen that in a lot of people, their practice. I spoke to a bunch of my students last night. We have these community calls to check in. I'm like helping them with their marketing, helping them with their stress. And one of the things people were talking about, I said, how's your practice? And almost everyone on the call said their practice was more solid now. Like they were practicing more now. Like
That's
out
great.
of necessity, out of emergency, out kind of, feel like
that's great.
they've got a metaphysical gun to their head. But pretty much everyone I've trained with has been like, yeah, I did 30 minutes of meditation yesterday. Normally I only do 10. I've been hitting a solid 30 minutes for a month now. And I was kind of I was, that's normal for me after a retreat. But often I'm slipping to 20 minutes, 10 minutes,
sure,
5 minutes while checking Facebook, So have you seen that phenomenon too? Or is it just amongst my guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, the people I'm talking with is much more, it's more just checking in to see how people are doing. I find myself connecting with people who are on the feeling on the isolated side.
Right.
And now I am still doing online meditations, with my community. And that's just very solid. We're all getting together and we're sharing and we're sitting together and we're inquiring into deeper questions. And there's a big community around that. That's really, I would say that these are a group of people who feel that at this time more than ever, it's important for them. But in terms of just reaching out to people, there's a lot of, I'm cool being isolated. I did 3 years of Vipassana retreat. It's like, I've got kids and family now, so it's a different story. But part of me is like really okay with that. But I realize, and that's the type thing, I think. But I realize that there are people that they need the social engagement to, human interaction, especially physical human interaction or in proximity human interaction.
Just I need a little sympathy. I realized yesterday I'm for all intents and purpose monogamous now. So this is pretty heavy. I know some people are already suffering, but this needs to be put to the front of the suffering queue.
What, being monogamous?
Yeah, I mean in enforced monogamy now. It's rough. I'm one of the more extra.
Well, like I said, here we are back to the first noble truth, Mark.
There is suffering. There's so much suffering. I'm okay with it, actually. Until I taught a course online to 30 Russians today, that made me cry. So, okay. So people alone, any recommendations for that? People who are, joking aside, that's a pretty rough position to be in. So any recommendations there for people who are, isolated on their own, maybe not getting the touch they would like?
You said it, Mark. Again, I'm going to answer this from a Buddhist perspective. The Buddha did say his last words on his deathbed, be a lamp unto yourself, or be an island unto yourself, self-reliance. This is a fundamental thing. Why is it that you're finding it difficult to be alone? Now, there can be a myriad of reasons for that, and all worthy to look into. But fundamentally, if we just sit with that and ask yourself, like you said, what is it that I'm not accepting here? And because that is the pathward, that is the inward path of meditation. The basic principle in meditation, whatever arises in the mind, or we can say whatever arises within the heart and the mind and the body of the yogi is the path. That's the fundamental, and as egoic beings, as human beings with a separate sense of self, when things arise that this separate sense of self doesn't really like, we tend to resist it and or deny it, or to try to control it, or to, we do all that normal human being stuff, that egoic activity. And meditation is not changing that. Meditation is not doing the opposite of that. Meditation is just seeing what's arising and being, detaching and observing. You got to get out of that loop. The closed loop. The mindfulness is the way to get out of the closed loop. There's not really anything that you can do to get out of the closed loop. You just have to first anchor yourself in one way or another in the present moment. And then whatever's arising, take it, detach and observe it as an object. That's the basic move in meditation. No matter what we're doing. You and I actually shared something before, but it all comes back. You can do a lot of different types of meditation. It's important according to the circumstances. But at the end of the day, it's all coming back to mindfulness, that simple capacity.
I've been teaching the doctors this, just like, hey, anxiety is caused by you having thoughts about the future and what you don't want to happen. If you stay in the present moment, you can bring yourself back with an anchor like the body or the breath. You'll cut that link. Don't believe me? Let's try it. That's my kind of 30-second pitch. And they try it. I taught a doctor who'd never meditated before in her life. And just a couple of days ago, she was like, wow, wow, that really works, doesn't it?
Well, but see, that's the thing. And it's liberating. That wow is a wow of liberation. It's a small little, small step for a doctor, a huge step for mankind, whatever. But it is a moment of a liberation, or 10 minutes of liberation. And then it's going to close down, but then we practice again. Not to never underestimate even one moment of being out of the cacophony that's going on in our head.
We're finding 1 minute or 3 minutes, even for these guys, is really good. They're not going to go sit for 20 minutes. 1 minute or 3 minutes of guided meditation is good for complete beginners.
Right, exactly.
And for me, there's been a few practices that have been useful. I find metta, just loving kindness, very soothing.
Perfect.
And also, as you say, that detaching, that, hey, this thought that I'm having going on right now about anxiety about the food and what, that's not me. That's something I can be aware of, so it's not me. Like that, very straightforward detachment move is so useful right now. And
so useful, not to confuse with emotional detachment, not to confuse with the denial or separating, but detachment in a healthy sense, that we just get out of the identification of whatever thoughts or shit that's going on in our hearts and minds. In the moment, we're able to get out and see it. That's huge.
Space, making that space between the observer and the observed, and still being with the emotions, but it's like, okay, I'm not that. I'm not drowning in that. I'm simply aware of that. And I think ultimately this move, if you talk about loneliness again, that requires a separate independent self. And for me, if I can, when I'm more able to merge into a
wait. Can you go back? Loneliness requires a separate independent self?
Sure. So I'm lonely, me on my own over here, away from you.
Like self-identified, like, oh, I'm poor, like I'm kind of a victim to the circumstances type of.
Victim to the circumstances, but also on a deeper level, when I've had those feelings of oneness, those feelings of connection through deeper states, I don't, like in solitary retreats, for example, I don't feel lonely.
No, not at all.
Like, not at all. It's not like, oh, I'm on my own in the woods anymore. It's like, I'm fucking one with everything. Why would I be?
Exactly. Yeah. And you did come to that through isolation. There was this kind of retreating, or in a way, kind of getting on your own for a little bit. Being alone does not necessarily equate to being lonely.
Right.
And you discover that through dropping into the moment again and again and again, until you're more anchored in the present than past and future.
So I've found myself very grateful for difficult or almost austere practices. Now, I know the Buddhist way is the middle way, but by the standards of modern decadent culture, the middle way looks extreme and austere. So, not by his standards, but for example, I'm glad I fasted for a few days, because if we do run out of food, not a problem, right?
Right, yeah.
Like it's like, I'm glad I've had that Aikido training that was really quite severe training, even though I don't particularly rate Aikido as a practical martial art. I think as a personal growth martial art, it's fantastic. And that austere warrior training for me right now has been really helpful. My Aikido sends a picture on my wall right now. I just find that very supportive. And then the retreats, the solitary retreats or the silent retreats, and having that training behind me now, I'm just so grateful. I feel much better equipped than I would say the average British person right now. And I don't mean that with any snobbery, just almost just like, well, thank God, that takes so much of the fear away from me.
Mark, I know that I'm sure that you're doing that now, but in the past, I know you focused specifically on working with nonprofits and with resiliency. And there is there's something called spiritual resiliency that my teacher Pandit used to talk about quite a bit, and it's very specific. It's we can maybe even talk about what resiliency means in a let's say a Western psychological definition, but from a strictly Buddhist perspective, and it is specific. This is that you gain the resiliency you gain from mindfulness practice under austere conditions. It has two aspects to it. One is a withstanding power. Mm-hmm. You're able to withstand you turn in, you sit down, 20 minutes, 20 days, it doesn't matter. You're going to go through some internal hell, and not that we're trying to embrace that it just happens. Right. Whatever's buried in us.
20 minutes when you're used to 10 minutes is going to give you a mini hell.
Exactly. Yeah. The sense of self is going to, the comfort zone is going to be pushed, and that's going to be uncomfortable. That could be intense or more or less intense, but it can feel like hell. And going through it again and again, you actually develop an internal withstanding power, number one.
Yeah.
The second aspect to resiliency that U Panditis talk about is repelling power.
Okay.
That you're able to really make healthy boundaries. It's like, no, I'm not going to actually let that into my system. You know, you're really able to kind of, you know, make a clear boundary of who you are. Now, I know it's not exactly mapping onto like Western psychological definition of resiliency. What would you say is resiliency from like
the
work
ability to bounce back from pressure and stress is a big one. It's the power of the recovery. But
and also the time of the recovery, right?
The time of the recovery.
How quick it happens.
I mean, you can look at it a number of ways. It's like how many coping mechanisms you've got. You can look at it neurologically, I would say, like and this is where maybe Israel doesn't do so well. It's like, where's your nervous system set to anyway? Right.
The baseline.
Yeah. So for example, if I'm making sure I get enough sleep and I'm eating 3 meals a day, because I don't want to be sleep deprived and have low blood sugar when I go on the line to these doctors and nurses. Like I want to be in a kind of resourced place personally. You know, the social support network is a huge one, and that's what a lot of people are suffering from, I would say.
Right.
Then there's
right, because they're disconnected.
Right, they're disconnected from people, and we're resilient. No matter how good your psychology is, we're social animals, and for most of us who aren't in a sort of, you know, enlightened Buddhist state, that is our biggest support. So that's one that I think people are underestimating. But I also see people naturally and unconsciously propping that up by getting to know their neighbors or calling their mum more often. Like I see people naturally propping up their social support right now in a very beautiful, quite touching way, actually.
Well, look at how many people are going online that I especially in the Aikido world, that swore.
Yes,
Mark, they swore, you can't do Aikido. I'll never go online. It's not my thing.
Miles, I think we deserve a moment of smugness here as early adopters, and for all those people that said the Embodiment Conference couldn't be done online, yeah, motherfuckers, you're on Zoom now, aren't you? So anyway, sorry, excuse a little bit of schadenfreude there, but I feel like we deserve that after years of getting shit from the Luddites. But it is good for us conservatives.
But to go back to the resiliency thing, because what we're discovering is that the intimacy can also be had through this digital medium.
Absolutely.
That there is a digital intimacy, and that strengthens our inter-resiliency, as you said.
I think people are getting better at being intimate online. I think it's a skill, and it's also a cultural norm. So as the culture...
Well, wait. Online on Zoom, not on Facebook, on Zoom.
No. Well, I think the mediums change. I think there's certain features of Facebook that reduce empathy. Like big audience, low actual mirror neuron kind of engagement, right? No real-time engagement, no face-to-face engagement, no tonality. Yeah, so that just encourages trolling and low empathy, and people turn into psychopaths effectively. I mean, that whole technology matters here, but what also matters is the supportive cultural zeitgeist. So the more it becomes normal to connect on Zoom, the more your mum does it and your gran does it, whatever, the more I've noticed people's capacity to deepen has increased on Zoom, and in some cases is deeper than real life because they feel safer, because they can turn their screen off, they're in their own house, they haven't had to travel to a workshop. And as that becomes more and more normal, we're going to see, and this is what happened at the conference, by day 5 people were able to go deeper than on day 1.
Yeah, I experienced that right away. Yeah, and there was a tipping point in the collective culture.
Yeah.
That once that happened, everybody really started to kind of, you know, there's like a critical mass that everybody starts to kind of fall in line with. And these days, like I think back 4 years ago, it used to take 10, 15, 20 minutes to ease into a session with people. Now we just, from the very beginning, boom, we're right there.
Yeah, we did that with interview today, didn't we? We just straight out the bat. I mean, we have past relationship and all the rest of it, but it's still getting way easier. Break to tell you about our program. So as well as the podcast, we have various kinds of online training. So we have the Embodied Yoga Principles online training, as well as in-person training. Embodied Yoga Principles for yogis who want to get yoga off the mat, specialize in the psychology of yoga, unique postures. It's a 5-day training. We have one in Brighton, one in Berlin, and one in Austin, Texas. So if you go to Embodied Yoga Principles, you can find them also the online version of the training for people who can't make those dates. Excellent courses. The Embodied Yoga Principles training for the yogis. For the coaches and facilitators, we have the Embodied Facilitator Course. This is our flagship course. We offer it in Moscow, also in the UK. A 9-month adventure, a real deep dive into embodiment. It's the biggest embodiment program I do. It could be like movement people who want to work in business more. We have people like dancers and martial arts teachers come to learn more about working in mainstream settings, but also for coaches and trainers who want something really well structured, who want to work on themselves, want to learn practical tools, learn how to work with the body in facilitation. If you can't make EFC, and it is a big ask, there's an online course we run called the Foundations of Embodiment Certification. So if you go to Embodied Facilitator, you'll find the in-person and then /FEC, FEC, F for Freddy, EC for Charlie, FEC. You'll come out with the Foundations of Embodiment Certification and also do one-day events all around the world. So I'm just about to do a tour to Slovenia, Berlin, Copenhagen, Brussels, Amsterdam, and Brighton. The Brighton one is £10, which is like $15. So if you're coming from abroad, that could make that affordable. The Brighton one's always like a really big fun one, so that's coming up. Again, go to the Embodied Facilitator course to see all of these events, and we have a little online evening as well if people just want a taster. Again, that's £10. That's a 3-hour thing coming up as well. Embodiedfacilitator.com, embodiedfacilitator.com, and you'll find all those events or embodied yoga principles for the yoga ones. Okay, so that's the stuff that I sell. Oh, and the book, the Embodiment book. If you want to get my book and learn about embodiment through reading, you can also get the Embodiment book available at Amazon and no good bookstores. So there we go. Excuse the interruption, and back to the episode. So back to resilience then, because that seems to be our key thing. Meditation and resilience. So any meditation practice is great. Being able to notice your own thinking is another big one, because a lot of our resilience comes from how we frame things. This is a basic Stoic philosophy, Epicurus, thinking kind of thing, Shakespeare. But it's being able to know, that's prerequisite, is being able to notice your thinking.
That's the whole thing. And if I just go back, if I connect this again to the Four Noble Truths, okay, not to be dogmatic or anything, but it's a brilliant system. It's just like he isolated 4 things that it's like, and there's sequential 4 things. The truth of, look, first, suffering exists. Second is that it has a cause. Third is that let go of the cause, reduce the suffering, if not eradicate the suffering. And the fourth one, that there's a path that leads to the reduction of suffering and the eradication of suffering. Each one of these 4 truths has a practice relationship. The truth of suffering, number 1, our practice relationship is acceptance. We have to practice acceptance. And that's preliminary, sequential. If you're not accepting, you can try to let go all day long, but it's not going to get to the core, because you first have to deeply accept the fact of what's happening right now.
Yes, relationship with reality. That's what acceptance is, a commitment to a reality. Commitment to
commitment. I'm wearing masks. When I go out, I got a mask on every time now.
You have to, I think. Yeah.
But what was it? I broke my arm, Mark, about 2 months ago. I fractured my elbow, and went to the hospital. My wife came with me, and COVID was already going on. Not Corona. Corona was already going on in China, but not so much here in the West.
Sure.
And she managed to find a mask in the hospital, and I'm thinking, you're just hypochondriac. What are you doing? and so I was not accepting, and I saw myself go through this week by week, really not really accepting. And now it's like, no,
it's a grief cycle. I've been tracking it according to grief cycle.
Totally a grief cycle.
Yeah.
So the practice relationship number 1 to the truth of suffering or destabilization is acceptance. Practice relation number 2 in relation to the second noble truth, which is the truth of the cause, that suffering has a cause, that causes grasping and clinging. The practice relationship is understanding, that we have to understand the cause. If we don't get it, when I say get it, I mean, it's like it's like
insight. You're talking about embodied, intuitive insight, not just cognitive understanding.
Emotionally, like deeply, you get, man, I'm fucking holding on here. I'm grasping, I'm clinging, I'm scared. I'm clinging because it's falling apart and shit's hitting the fan and I can't. So that's it. And when you really see that, you start to understand that there's a cause. And that's the beginning of until you fully into that process and fully get the second noble truth, the truth of the cause, you can't begin the third noble truth. And then once you get it, quite naturally, the practical relationship for the third noble truth. The third noble truth is cessation, or the letting go. You let go of the cause, you stop the grasping, stop the clinging, and you begin the process of becoming free of the suffering, or you certainly mitigate it. And the practice relationship to that is realization. That you have to realize letting go. And it's the real thing. You know, I think of like addictive behaviors that we all have. At some point when you finally get it, and you finally, you always think you hit rock bottom, but then you really hit rock bottom. It's like, oh, now I get it. I get why this whole thing's happening. That's the beginning of really changing things, of letting go of all the suffering that the self-suffering that we cause, not to mention the suffering that we cause others.
Yeah, that's a nice example of the difference between cognitive getting it and a deeper getting it. Because, when I was an alcoholic, I knew years before I quit that I had a problem and I should stop, and it was making me suffer. Like that can be years before you one day wake up. You one day just wake up and go, enough. It's like you see through it in a different way.
And that's the thing, Mark. So first there's acceptance, and acceptance is just the beginning. Can't change anything until you accept it, as they say in therapy. Once you accept it, you can begin the work. Getting to understand it, that can take time. It's like, what's his name? Rilke, in his poets, Letters to a Young Poet, he says, don't try to find the answers. Live the question deeply. Live it deeply, and then in some day far in the future, the answer will live into you. It's going to come. The understanding will come. Once you get the understanding, then you can actually practice realizing that we stop. We get the power to stop the bullshit that we do in life.
Better do number 4.
Number 4 is the truth of the path. The practice relationship in our practice in relationship to the truth of the path is what you and I are doing right now. We are developing our practice. We're developing the path. So it goes from acceptance to understanding to realization to development. These are the 4 practices in relationship to the
Let's go really practical then as we hit 4. So people at home, maybe they're a bit stressed. Maybe they haven't done huge numbers of retreats, but they've meditated a little bit. They've got the app. Maybe they did have a Vipassana retreat once. That's pretty much the average listener. Some a bit deeper than that. What would be your kind of advice on kind of propping up their practice, developing their practice during these weird few months we have?
Well, if we just look at it developmentally, we have to understand that, where a person's at in their meditation completely determines the advice or the instructions that you would give somebody. So I'll just kind of start at a more basic level. Is, just find a practice that you can establish, find a method, I should say, that you can establish a regular, if not daily, practice. And that daily practice can be 30 minutes a day. It can be 2-minute mindfulness breaks, a couple of times a day. That's really, it doesn't take much. A basic method is, anchoring. Whatever it is, you've got to anchor the mind in the present moment. That could be on the breath, which is kind of the most common. It could be some physical activity. It could be yoga. It could be qigong. It could be aikido in a sense. It could be just exercises. But really kind of anchoring your mindfulness in the body. Activities are good because it gives you something to do and you try to synchronize everything together. Just sitting is really ultimately where we go with meditation. Anchoring it in the body means to observe the belly as the breath's expanding and as it's contracting. Just going to stay with those movements. And as you do that practice, well, you can also anchor in the feelings and in the perceptions and in thoughts that are arising. So anything can be an anchor for the present moment. But it's important to choose one. And I recommend choosing one and sticking with it as your home base. So always constantly coming back. You can try different techniques and stuff like that. That's all fine. But, if you want to reach the source, if you want to dig a well and reach the source, you need to stay in one place long enough to reach the source. So one method tends to be good. And with mindfulness-based meditation, it doesn't really matter which method you're using.
Practice monogamy again, man. Practice monogamy. That's what it's all about, the marriage. So listen, you just gave the 2 answers. I realize I get asked a lot of questions in courses, and I realize I only ever give 2 answers. One is, it depends. And the second one is practice. And you literally just gave those 2 answers. And it does seem like that's, if listeners have any, out there listening, just put those 2 answers on any question you have. It depends, right? Where are people in their practice? What do you need today? Where are you developmentally? There's no one answer to fit all, right? Or else there wouldn't be any need for teachers. And the second one is, well, you've got to practice something. That's the simple thing, is pick something and practice it.
Yeah. So I would say I'll give a 3-step move that's very simple. It's maybe an oversimplification, but it works. But it's also advanced. So first is whatever arises in your experience, you can take it as an object. Anything that you experience, you can actually take it as an object of observation. You can create the observer, create the witness with mindfulness, because remember, mindfulness is dualistic. It's the part of the mind that observes something arising. So move number one is whatever arises in your experience, you can take as an object. Move number two, I actually call these 3 points of light. So point of light, number one, it's kind of lights us forward in the practice, is whatever's arising in our experience, take it as an object. So just feel your experience right now in the body, mind, heart, and spirit. Whatever's coming up, you can actually, with skill, with some practice and with some skill, you can take that as an object of observation, number one. Number two, whatever you take as an object of observation, whatever you observe is not you. It's not you. Because if you're observing it, then it can't be you. It's something outside. Even if it's inside, it's not you. That's where our identities are embedded in these things. And when we detach and observe, we're also detaching from that identity, which is a fixation. Okay. And then we come back and identify. That's all fine. And, being, going for your preferences, your likes, your fears, whatever, that's all normal. But in the meditation, we really work on, whatever I observe is not me. Point of light number two. Point of light number three, and this is really the whole ball game. Point of light number one is whatever arises in your experience, you can take as an object. Point of light number two, whatever you can take as an object is not you. And point of light number three is everything can be taken as an object. Everything in your experience can be taken as an object with practice.
I'm thinking maybe let's do a little guided thing. Are you up for doing, there's plenty of other guided meditations on working with the breath or whatever. Maybe a little big mind thing, something like that. Take it a little bit more. I know you like to do that online. Are you up for that today, Miles?
With you?
Yeah, with me, but also with listeners.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll even do the big mind myself, and let's see. I've never done it on a pre-recorded listeners type of thing, but let's say we invite all the listeners to step in, and without even going into too much description of this, because to set it up takes a little bit of description.
Are there any practical things here, like if people are driving or doing stuff? Walking along.
I would just say apply it to what you're doing. Apply it to what you're doing, because I'm going to ask questions for, let's say, people not driving, but you should apply it to what you're doing. So if you're driving, just put it in that context, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. We're not checking out and going into nirvana or anything like that. We're just going to do a very simple process. What is important is that I'm going to ask you to speak to different aspects of the self, and what's important is that you identify as the aspect, and you speak about yourself in third person. So, for example, if I ask to talk to the controller, you take, I am the controller and my job is blah, blah, blah. And you speak about the self. And in this case, Miles, I do my job as a controller because Miles will sleep too late. He won't get up and take care of the kids. And so I put the self in third person. That's kind of the main move that we have to make. Okay. So let's begin. So take a deep breath. And since you and I, Mark, are we have a pretty healthy and maybe sometimes overworked controller aspect. Let's start with the controller. Take a deep breath, and let's you and I both speak to the controller. And who am I speaking to?
The controller.
Great. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, it's very helpful if you say this out loud. But if you're embarrassed and you don't want to do that, say it inside. So I'm going to ask the podcast listeners again. Who am I speaking to?
Controller.
The controller. Here we are. Great. As a controller, Mark, let's start with you. What's your job? Controlling everything. Great. And then podcasters, people listening, also kind of ask yourselves, what's your job? When I ask you, give the answer. And let's talk about right now in this coronavirus, COVID-19, end of the world apocalypse. Mr. Mark, what's your job as the controller?
First thing, I want to control all the listeners to make sure they're doing it properly. I notice myself doing that. And in terms of this situation we're in, I want to kind of like get all the food in. I want to make sure everything's under control. Like, we've got everything in the house, everything's sorted, make sure my wife's doing her job, kind of like do everything like that. Yeah, me too. I'm like total. It's survival. Primarily me as the controller. It's kind of survival. Even making sure. It. As a controller, I kind of like it because it's like emergency mode, so I get to just take charge. Totally.
Totally. Me too. Yeah. I make sure the refrigerator is full, make sure that we're stocked up, make sure there's plenty of, we got masks now, and that's my job, is to make sure. And also the finances, I got to keep the finances coming in for the family. And it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And all that stuff. So as the controller, let me ask you this, and I'll also ask the same thing to the listeners. What freaks you out right now?
That there's things that are hard for me to control, that there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of things shifting that I had nailed down and now aren't nailed down, that my wife won't do what I want, that other human beings are doing what they want.
Yeah, what freaks me out is also, let's just say with a wife, if I had my way, she would be cool and not emotional right now. But when she gets, actually, she's pretty cool and emotional these days, I must say, because it's quiet at home. But I would prefer to her to be like a man and just be like, let's get to business and let's get this job done. But that's not how she is, and I can't control her, and that kind of drives me nuts sometimes. What also I don't like is when I have to go shopping. There's people that keep the distance, but there are some people that just have no awareness, and I want to shake them. I want to grab them and say, what are you doing? Of course, I can't grab them because, these are the types of things. And also Miles's finances, I can't control that. I wish I could, but I can't.
Yeah. The marketplace, for sure. Yeah. Buy Mark stuff,
Yeah, buy Mark stuff. Exactly right. No, don't buy Mark stuff. Buy Miles's stuff.
No, Mark stuff. Don't listen to this guy.
So these are the things that we wish we could control. All right. So let's shift to another voice. All right. Okay. Take a deep breath, everybody. And allow me to speak to the voice of, which would probably just underneath the controller, but let me speak to the voice of fear.
Okay.
And who am I speaking to?
Fear.
Great. And I'm the voice of fear. What's your job as fear?
To keep Mark out of trouble, and to keep Mark and Darius safe, and to help predict the future. Lean Mark towards cautiousness.
Lean him towards caution. That's a big move for Mark, because he's usually a big risk taker.
Good at it as fear. I'm not that impressed by Mark quite often. Yeah, my job as fear is in one way, when shit hits the fan or when things start to fall apart, is to, in a way, paralyze Miles. To kind of freeze him, so he doesn't. In a way, it's weird. I freeze him, and he doesn't like it at all. I freeze him. At least he doesn't shake, but he doesn't really like it. And I think I do that as a way to keep him from shaking, to just keep him stable when there is no stability around. That feels to me like what my kind of main job there is. Yeah. Maybe the listeners can also connect in. Let me ask you this, Mark. As fear, how do you benefit Mark? You already said a few things. Keep him safe. Trying move him away from dangerous things, stupid things, like make him wash his hands, make him not touch his face. I notice as fear, I'm really, really tight in the body, which is so pleasurable in a way. But it's like, as fear, it's like, no, this is necessary. You've got to get serious here about certain things, Mark.
Yeah, it's basic safety.
Yeah, safety, and definitely on team control.
Yeah, it's fear. I feel I'm very much up in my chest and contracted, and the arms are crossed, and I think I'd benefit him just to keep him stable somehow. To keep him in a way frozen. I don't know. Let me ask you this: what would happen to Mark if you disappeared?
Well, I think I'm underused by Mark sometimes. Anyway, Mark's in denial that I exist sometimes, and as a result, Mark gets in more trouble than if he listened to me a little bit more. If I completely disappeared, then Mark would be dead within a week.
Okay, so on one hand, you keep him out of trouble when he listens to you. But if you weren't there, he would. From your opinion, he'd be dead in a week.
Yeah.
So you keep him alive. You keep him alive at least for the next week, which is these days. That's good.
In a way, I'm sort of glad that people are listening to me more right now. Yeah.
We'll just have to make sure that Mark listens to the replay. All right, cool. So I was just feeling, if I disappeared, first on one hand, Miles would be more relaxed. He would be a little bit more free and agile, because I do paralyze him a little bit. but he would also maybe not be so alert to what's really important in these moments. Yeah, in these days, I should say. So I try to keep him really in touch with what's going on now. All right, so shall we shift to another voice?
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, please allow me to speak with the voice of surrender.
Hello.
Yeah, take a deep breath. For the listeners, take a deep breath and really kind of let go into this one. And the whole point of this, like this big mind process, that we really take a moment and we validate and honor the different aspects of ourselves. We're not bypassing anything. We're not pushing it away. We're not in competition. So fear is there, and fear is good, true, and beautiful, has its purpose. And now we're just going to shift out of that and into the voice of letting go. So who am I speaking to?
Letting go. Surrender.
What's your job? Surrender. Sorry. Yeah. Surrender. What's your job?
Okay. It's all good. It's all good. My job is to be okay with reality, to help Mark be in contact with reality, to reduce fear and control, and to put Mark more at peace rather than struggling against things.
Yeah, beautiful. I just connected when you said reduce fear and control, because Miles has that a lot too. But my feeling is, for me, and there's no wrong answers with these voices. For me, it's not so much about reducing fear and control. It's more like they're going to do their job. They're going to be fine. Fear knows exactly what to do. Control, I can just let go, man. I can just really surrender. I don't even have to worry about doing all these fucking jobs. I can just really let go, and that's deeply relaxing. Deeply relaxing for Miles.
Yeah, it's like at the end of the day when Mark's done his long day, he's done 10, 12 hours work and there's nothing more to do. And it's like, then I'm really useful. I can be like, okay, we can't do anything about that right now. Just chill right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Especially for Mark and Miles, because they're both running kind of businesses and it's complex.
There's a lot right now.
And you can't let go. Or they can't let go. It's not the time to let go of things. But for you and for me, that's what I do. I let go. How do you benefit? How do you benefit, Mark?
Peace, rest, sleep. I really feel like it's letting go. Like Mark's actually pretty good at going to sleep, and I'm quite good at just like letting him all let it go at the end of the day. Bath and or just stuff like there was a little thing that went wrong on this COVID Calm project the other day, and I just kind of stepped in and said, Mark, you know what? Don't worry about it. We'll get a new member of staff. Cool. Just that one's resigned. Just don't worry about it now. We'll pick that up. Cool. We'll pick. My phone was, the phone was ringing this morning. And just let it go. Let it go.
Super important for Mark's work. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be able to really kind of not sweat. What's that?
Totally crazy without me.
Yeah. And not to sweat the small stuff, like the old saying goes.
Yeah, and it's all small stuff. Like the phone was ringing today when Mark was trying to meditate, and it was just I just turned the phone off for him, almost like, hey, that can wait 30 minutes. Just let it go for now.
How about Mark's monogamy?
I help Mark be at peace with the terrible situation he finds himself in. Actually, jokes aside, I think Mark's actually pretty at peace with that right now, and it's great. Okay.
That's beautiful. All right, so here's a good question. Then, as surrender, and I'm asking also the listeners, if you're connecting with this voice within yourself, because even though visually we don't have the mirror neurons going, actually, if we listen to each other, the mirror neurons are also being activated, and we're in the voice of surrender. What would happen to Mark if you disappeared? If you didn't do your job, what would happen?
As surrender.
As surrender.
So I slipped out of it. I went into control again because I was looking at the time and noticing we were short time.
Okay, hang on. No, that's good. That's great. Who am I talking to?
That was the voice of like checking up on things, kind of like control, but like a sub-helper of control.
Cool. Can you control Mark and have him go back into surrender?
Yes.
Okay. I got the time. I'm besides watching the time. Don't worry.
That's good. That's a relief. Surrender.
Okay. And what's your relationship to time and deadlines and time schedules?
For me, there isn't a worry about time, but that's one of Mark's. Mark finds it difficult to access me when he's against the clock.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm not going to manipulate so we go over time here. So it's just you can trust me on that one. But as surrender is
in the background,
I know. Okay, so as surrender, can you surrender to the fact that Mark's controller is really kind of starting to jump in and take control of things?
Sure.
Can you surrender to that? Yeah, good. Yeah. You have anything to say to his controller?
It's all good. Miles is pretty good with time, and also as a surrender, I'm pretty cool with the fact that there's this like control freak running around in the background the whole time, checking up on shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is good because that's his job. Do you know what I mean? Like that's his job. So
exactly.
That's right.
And you can let go. That's perfect. Okay, so we'll finish off with one last voice, and then we'll leave it at that. Since we were speaking about the observer, mindfulness, basically to be able to observe or witness. I take a deep breath and let me speak to the voice of pure observer. And who am I speaking to?
Awareness.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's
What's your function? Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So it's difficult even to articulate this. Yeah. Do you have a function?
I don't really have a job.
How do you be?
Witnessing it all.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was to say I had a job, it would be being present to it all.
Yeah. And for the listeners, if you're driving your car, if you're riding your bicycle or walking, keep doing that. Trust that the part of yourself that knows how to do that is going to do that. But this witness, as the witness, observe all that happening. Just to observe, looking at the clock that the minutes are ticking down. And yeah, that's cool. The aspect of Mark that needs to step in, Miles, and whatever your driver, it's all going to step in when it's time, when it's important. But we never disconnected with this path, this ability to just detach and observe. As the observer, last question, when were you born?
Timeless.
Yeah. And when will you die?
Timeless. So I kind of always want to laugh at that question.
Yeah. Kind of doesn't even compute in a way.
It's interesting from this position looking at the crisis because it seems much more like a small blip. And there's care there. There's like, hey, I hope everybody's okay. But there's also like, it is okay if everyone dies or civilization collapses or...
Yeah, from this perspective, we can actually see it all fall apart. And maybe because let's just balance this out. From the observer, take a deep breath. Let me speak to the voice of pure compassion.
Yeah, that was there before, and as compassion is the same sense of spaciousness, but a little more juiciness and warmth. Should we say a little bit more? Yeah. A little more.
And when you look out and see all those people that are going through this crisis right now, what is your basic function?
There's compassion, heart, care. I think I can be motivating Mark to get his ass to gear into some useful action.
Great.
Like, hey, I kind of want to encourage Mark. Some of the things he's doing seem pretty solid. Like, hey, great, keep doing that. And also, it's okay if you can't. Like you need a day off. That's okay. Yeah,
right. So you not only care and compassion for others, but also for Mark.
Yeah. Like, hey, don't burn yourself out. Don't make yourself ill again. But also, it's really linked to action for me, and there's still a little bit of that. It's all okay. It's not overly clingy. Right. The care isn't like you have to be well. It's not like in your own.
It's all okay, and you completely feel how it's not okay. You completely feel how it's not okay for people. So, listen, I know we're running out of time, so let me just wrap this. You got to do one last voice, and this is not even going to be voice. The fully integrated, freely functioning human being, bringing the controller, the fear, the surrender, the observer and pure compassion as one voice, fully integrated, freely functioning human being. Take a deep breath. Listeners as well. And who am I speaking to?
Mark.
Mark.
Good.
Welcome back.
Oh, I always love that, man. It's so profound. If people listen to this without following it, I think they wouldn't really get it. It would sound weird. But if they were doing it along, it can be a hell of a thing. So I really recommend that whole process.
Yeah.
Listen, I need to wrap up. I'm talking to our mutual friend, Matt Hill, next. You know Matt Hill that you were at Uchideshi with for a while?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're on the phone to our Matt. Good guys.
You have to send him my love. Listen, I've got something for your listeners. Is that okay?
Please do. Yeah. Plug yourself. Come on.
Listen, I'm opening up my kind of membership program, meditation. It's called Meditation Discovery Cycle. We do meditation. We spend a month on meditation in the body, a month on meditation in the mind, meditation in the heart, meditation in the spirit, then 1 month in integration. It's a full cycle of discovery. Then we start back over. It's an ongoing membership meditation program. It's great price. It's relatively cheap. And if anybody's having difficulty during these times, and we're also waiving the fees for people who have a real sincere intent to meditate. But what I want to offer to your listeners is a month free to join the program.
Where do they go? We're on time, so we need to say quick. Where do they go?
Yeah.
Matt's always on time because he's ex-military.
Okay, theintegraldojo.com/the Embodiment Podcast. Okay, theintegraldojo.com/the Embodiment Conference. And you can find all the information. Click there, you'll get put right in, and we meet on Sundays. So,
well, it's beautiful as ever. Thank you. Please send me that link so we can make sure it goes out as well if people want to get, if they missed that. And that was deep and wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Miles.
Always a pleasure, Mark. Good luck to you.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/Embodiment Podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. Most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator Course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you.